Well, good Saturday morning to you. Here's the good news. As you've heard, tens of thousands of dock and port workers are going back to work now after the union and the U.S. Maritime Alliance reached a tentative agreement for the labor dispute. The International Longshoremen's Association of North America, which is the largest union of maritime workers, this includes 85,000 dock and port workers, established a provisional wage deal, and the breakthrough came after port employees reportedly offered a 62% wage increase over 6 years. The agreement also extends their master contract to add more time to iron out details over the new contract. The International Longshoremen's Association and the United States Maritime Alliance Limited have reached this agreement, and they're going to extend the master contract through January 15th of 2025. This is going to allow them to return to the bargaining table and negotiate all the other outstanding issues in January. All current job action will stop immediately, as many of the 50,000 maritime workers will return to work on October 4th. So this is really great news. All current job action is over. For the first time in nearly 50 years, the United States witnessed the largest shutdown of the Atlantic and Gulf Coast ports. Midnight on October 1st, tens of thousands of dock and port workers all the way from Maine to right here in Texas went on strike. The ILA had rejected the offer of the nearly 50% wage increase with improved retirement benefits and enhanced automation and semi-automation protections. Work stoppages were estimated to affect billions of trade. The ILA president, Harold Doggett, said earlier the union was prepared to fight it out as long as necessary. And in this case, the economists predicted that a week or a month-long disruption could have harmed the economy severely, which in the old days, we're already in what would have been called a recession. But, as long as there's a Democrat in the White House, it's not possible for us to have a recession. So, wink, wink. According to the conference board, the one-week port strike could have cost the economy $3.78 billion, around $5.5 million a day. Grace Zwemmer, associate U.S. economist at Oxford Economics, estimated that the strike would trim the gross domestic product growth by as much as 0.13%, or about $7.5 billion for each day that it was in place. As for inflation, U.S. businesses and consumers were worried about the higher prices. You see, the ports handle between 35 and 49% of all U.S. imports and exports, with the ports of New Jersey, Houston, and Galveston handling a substantial part of these. These ports get a wide range of goods, including agricultural products, electronics, European automobiles, parts, and household goods. The American Farm Bureau Federation estimated that the ILA handled ports manage about 1.5 billion weekly of agricultural trade. 90% of the cherries, 85% of canned food, 82% of hot peppers, love those, 80% of chocolate, and 75% of the nation's bananas come in through these terminals. The industry leaders have been urging Joe Biden to intervene and invoke the 1947 Taft-Hartley Act. That would have allowed the White House to file a court order and institute an 80-day cooling-off period, allowing both sides to return to the negotiating table. Americans experienced the pain of delays and shortages of goods during the pandemic back in 2021, Suzanne Clark of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce said in a letter to the president. It would be unconscionable to allow a contract dispute to inflict such a shock on our economy at a point in time when we're trying to get Cammie elected, she said. Well, she didn't exactly say that, but you know what I'm saying. Today's tentative agreement on a record wage and an extension of the collective bargaining process represents critical progress towards strong contracts. So we can congratulate the dock workers who definitely deserve a strong contract because they did sacrifice a lot over the last few years. And let's face it, with Bidenomics doing what it's doing, the average buying power for the American family has gone down almost 50%. I mean, things that you used to just take for granted now are just stupid expensive. And so we cannot blame these guys for wanting to have more. We can't blame them for that. Certainly, they work hard. They deserve it. I'll tell you who doesn't work hard to deserve it. That's all the illegal aliens that keep coming in across our border, and they are getting gazillions of dollars, your tax dollars. You didn't vote to do that, did you? How about a country the size of Ukraine, the size of Texas, that's getting hundreds of billions of dollars with no checks, no balances, and no accountability? Yeah, your tax dollars, you didn't vote for that, did you? But that's why you want to reelect Cami, because you love it so much. Now, this. Of course, no doubt you've heard about the extreme storm damage, and I urge all of you to continue to pray for those people because they have lost, in many cases, everything. And we here in the Texas area, in the Golden Triangle, we know what it's like to have a hurricane come through and kind of wipe us out. So let's be praying for those. Meanwhile, whoever's wearing the Joe Biden suit is continuing his tour across areas impacted by Hurricane Helene. He's visiting Florida and Georgia to survey the damage from the deadly storm. He was kind of forced into this, whoever's doing that, kind of forced into it because Donald Trump and Elon Musk were already out there doing stuff. But he delivered remarks after surveying the damage in Ray City, Georgia, and defended the federal government's response efforts. He said, it's moments like this that we have to put politics aside. He emphasized the need to unite around this disaster recovery. He said that his administration's major spending initiatives have benefited red states more than blue states over the last 3.5 years. He defended the rescue efforts, stating that he deployed extensive resources even before Helene made landfall and approved emergency declarations. And of course, Kamala, when asked about this situation, she said, well, I was raised a middle-class child. We'll come back to that later. Before heading to Georgia, Biden took an aerial tour of Florida's coast, surveying the flooded areas in the small town of Perry, which is about an hour's drive from Tallahassee. Later, he took a driving tour along Keaton Beach, where the wreckage was severe, saying, boy, I'm glad my beach is in a lot better shape than that. Then he went to North Carolina and South Carolina, where Cami was touring Georgia to survey the damage there. Greene Jean-Pierre, the Haitian teddy bear, told reporters on the way to Florida that both Ron DeSantis and Governor Brian Kemp have been invited, but opted not to join along with the Biden tour. I want to thank Governor Kemp, whom I spoke with this morning, Biden said during his remarks, but he did not mention DeSantis. Anyway, during Biden's visit, DeSantis was holding a news conference on Anna Maria Island, which was among the areas that was hit hard by Hurricane Helene. Since the recovery efforts have begun, DeSantis tried to draw a contrast between the state's response and the federal government's response, saying that the state was able to move much faster than the feds were in this particular case. He said the feds would have been able to work faster had there been some January 6ers among the crowd that could have been arrested. But anyway, you see how this response went and the prep and the immediate response. And this is as an overwhelming state and local situation. That's how we view it. We don't want to be waiting on the feds. We want to be able to lean into this. Meanwhile, whoever's wearing the Biden suit was accompanied on his Florida tour by the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, and Senator Rick Scott. And while there, the president, I use the term loosely, spoke with first responders and local officials. He received an operational update on response efforts and went on a walking tour. According to the White House, he spoke with a couple who had lost their home in the hurricane and are currently living in their RV, which is parked in their driveway where their house used to be. In Georgia, Raphael Warnock, Warlock, Democrat Georgia, and Representative Sanford Bishop, Democrat Georgia, accompanied Joe Biden, also looking for opportunities where they might be able to make a little money on the deal. And when asked about comments made by House Speaker Mike Johnson, Biden warned about the urgent funding need. And Johnson said a supplemental funding package can wait until after the election. We can't wait. People need help now, Biden said in response. And that's why we're going to give you all of these people $750 big dollars to help them recover from this. Anyway, Congress had previously provided FEMA with the funds it needed to respond, so we're going to make sure those resources are appropriately allocated before we give any more, Johnson said. I wish they'd have done that with all the money that went to Ukraine, because that money has just disappeared. Nobody really knows what happened to it, and they don't know where the final recipients ended up. Anyway, more than 50 counties across Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, including land owned by the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, has been dedicated as a major disaster area by Biden. Recovery efforts at the federal, state, and local levels have been underway for nearly a week, and so far they've given these guys more than $10 million. $10 million. That's with an M. Dollars. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Anyway, during his speech in Georgia, Biden criticized the partisanship. He said, it's our job to help as many people as we can, and that's why we're taking such good care of all of these brand new Americans that just got here that don't speak the language, and we're writing them checks for thousands of dollars, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 in some cases. And our job is to make sure that all of these brand new Americans have enough money that they can afford to vote Democrat. I don't know. In other news, President Donald Trump is seeking permission from a federal judge to lodge an oversized filing in his criminal case in Washington after Special Prosecutor Jack Smith was allowed to file a 165-page brief. Trump wants to file a 180-page motion in response to his brief. Lawyers for the president told U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan this case centers on charges brought against Trump ahead of and during the January 6th breach of the U.S. Capitol. U.S. Supreme Court ruled over the summer that presidents are immune from prosecution for official acts, but not for unofficial acts, and remanded the case back to Chutkan. I would like to remind you that the 5 rights guaranteed you by the First Amendment to the Constitution, the 5 rights that are recognized as God-given rights, and one of those 5 rights is the right to seek redress from government. And of course, when Donald Trump requested us to come up there and do exactly that, seek redress from government, we showed up for the simple reason that we wanted Congress to realize we knew they were about to do something very bad. They were about to certify a lie, and we didn't like it. And we wanted them not to do that. We really thought that if we, the people, showed up en masse asking for them to do the right thing, that they would remember that they are elected representatives. We shall see. A New Hampshire grand jury has issued 6 indictments charging a Massachusetts couple with wrongful voting in 3 election cycles. New Hampshire Attorney General John Formella announced on September 26 that Joshua Yurovich and his wife Lisa, ages 56 and 54, have been charged with 3 felony counts of wrongful voting. The indictments allege that the couple was living in Ashland, Massachusetts when they voted in Concord, New Hampshire in the November 2020 election and the November 8, 2022 general election and the November 8, 2022 Concord School District elections. Officials haven't released information on the couple's motives or whom they even voted for. Both the Yuroviches are scheduled to be arraigned in Merrimack County Superior Court on October 7th. Current New Hampshire law allows that those who don't bring a photo ID or sign an affidavit affirming their identity, the voters must then agree to provide documentation within 7 days after casting their vote. In September, New Hampshire Republican Governor Chris Sununu signed House Bill 1569, which requires proof of citizenship when registering to vote and a photo ID when casting a ballot. I don't guess I have a problem with any of that. The New Hampshire grand jury issued 6 indictments charging them with wrongful voting in all 3 of those cycles. The idea behind all of this was to eliminate voter ID exceptions and increase requirements for documents such as passports or birth certificates to prove that you're actually a U.S. citizen. We have a proud tradition and a proven track record of condition elections that are trusted and true, said Sununu. I am looking forward to the next decade or two. This legislation will instill even more integrity and trust in the voting process. House Bill 1569 won't take effect until after the presidential elections, however, because we don't want to do anything that might prevent these brand new Americans from voting. Critics said the new law will disenfranchise these brand new Americans and undermine their trust in the election process. While this law would not be in effect for the coming election, any change in this law this close to a major election risks confusing all of the voters, Lauren Kunis, director of the advocacy group Vote Writers, said. We know that voter ID initiatives like HB 1569 aren't about security at the ballot box, he said. They're about preventing voters from being able to vote. Republicans, however, say that the influx of these brand new Americans and the risk that a lot of these brand new Americans who aren't quite eligible to vote is much higher. Therefore, we need to have stricter voter ID laws to make sure that their rights are protected. As I've said before, and probably you have said too, insist on proper voter ID to prevent Trump from stealing the election. The House of Representatives recently passed the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, otherwise known as SAVE. It was introduced by our own Representative Chip Roy, Republican of Texas. The legislation amends the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 to require that you prove you're an actual legal citizen if you're going to vote for president or for anything else in a federal election. American elections are supposed to be for American citizens, and we intend to keep it that way, said Republican Rep. Brian Still of Wisconsin. He's chairman of the House Administrative Committee, which held the hearing on the act. And moving right along, in the shenanigans file, federal prosecutors have asked a Florida judge for an indefinite delay in scheduling the trial for a man accused of attempting to assassinate Donald Trump at his West Palm Beach golf course last month, where the Secret Service had somehow, through oversight, allowed this huge area to go unprotected. Anyway, citing the large amount of evidence they have to sift through, they said, we just need more time on this. Ryan Ruth appeared in federal court on September 30th in West Palm Beach, where he pled not guilty to attempted assassination of a major presidential candidate and assaulting a police officer and felony weapons charges. Law enforcement officials allege that Ruth, a roofing contractor, had positioned himself with a rifle outside of Trump International Golf Club while the president was playing golf in an unscheduled game that no one knew about. They further allege that Ruth intended to kill Donald Trump, but was discovered hiding near the fence by a U.S. Secret Service agent who opened fire on him, firing 6 times and not hitting a single thing. Ruth allegedly fled and was later arrested along a Florida highway. In the filing, Florida District Judge Eileen Cannon said they still need to trawl through the evidence concerning the second suspected assassination attempt on Trump in roughly 2 months. The prosecutors asked Judge Cannon to designate his case as complex. This will give them time to sift through all of this voluminous evidence. That's probably why they released the alleged manifesto showing the reward amount for killing Donald Trump. Over the past 2 weeks, the United States has interviewed hundreds of witnesses, prosecutors said in the filing, and executed 13 search warrants in Florida, Hawaii, and North Carolina, and seized hundreds of items of evidence and probably arrested some more J6ers while they were doing it. More than 100 subpoena returns are still pending on this case. Officials have thousands of videos, still images, text files, and audio files to review. The FBI is still conducting forensic testing on multiple pieces of evidence. This includes ballistics testing, fingerprint and DNA comparisons, all on a guy who may have had a gun but never allegedly fired a shot. It's hard to tell. Remember, he was sticking his gun through the fence, and that's how they saw him, because he had his gun stuck through the fence. Anyway, based on preliminary results from some of the testing, the government anticipates it's going to call several expert witnesses to testify at the trial. Pursuant to Rule 16 of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, the government must provide expert witness disclosure sufficiently in advance of the trial to provide the defendant a fair opportunity to meet the government's evidence. Governmental prosecutors are demanding this. Concluding their request, the prosecutors also noted the reactive nature of the prosecution, and they mean that the investigation of this case is still ongoing. Prosecutors anticipate that additional witnesses, of course, will be interviewed and further evidence will be collected, and even more records will be obtained via subpoenas and search warrants. The last I heard, this guy had not been charged with attempted murder. He had not been charged with attempted assassination. He was simply being held on weapons charges, and they're not even sure it was his weapon that they found at the scene. They found the AK-style rifle. They found a bag of snacks, a digital camera, bags containing metal plates wished to withstand return fire from the Secret Service at the 6th hole of a golf course where he allegedly hit on the day of the apparent assassination. They haven't been completely clear on this, but apparently this guy's basically in the parking lot, sticking his gun through the wire to aim at Donald Trump, and he's been there for like 8, 10, 12 hours. As Wilbur Witt so aptly put it, they're lucky the guy didn't order Chinese. He was there waiting for so long. The other question that must arise is, since this was a last-minute decision by Donald Trump to go play golf with a friend here on a day the golf course was allegedly closed, how did Mr. Ruth know that Donald Trump was going to be there? Nobody's asking that question, are they? But they want to wait until after the election to hold a trial on this. I do like the fact that Florida has decided they're going to do their own investigation, pointing out that the Justice Department that's been going after Trump tooth and nail now for how many years? 6, 7 years? That Justice Department is now the one that's charged with trying to find the guy that tried to kill him. Seems like a conflict of interest to me. But anyway, the story goes on. Donald Trump has his own private security, and he is protected from on high by the hand of the mighty God in Christ. That's the good news. And Donald Trump needs his own private security to protect himself from the federal government, which has vowed, in my mind, to kill him. In other news, federal prosecutors have charged 5 Chinese nationals for allegedly lying and trying to conceal their actions more than a year after they were spotted near a remote Michigan military site where thousands of troops had gathered for summer drills. The 5 defendants, who were undergrad students at the University of Michigan at the time of the incident in August of 2023, left the United States after graduating in May, according to the criminal complaint. They filed, Arrest warrants have now been issued for these 5 individuals, but they're very likely back in China, would be my guess. So they're not in custody, and if they do come in contact with U.S. authorities, they will be arrested and face these charges, a spokesperson for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Detroit said. The incident happened at Camp Grayling, the largest Army National Guard training facility in the United States, during last summer's Northern Strike training event. According to Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, more than 7,000 participants from 25 states, 1 territory, and 4 countries took part in these military exercises. The 5 Chinese defendants are not charged for what happened at Camp Grayling, however. They are accused of misleading investigators about their trip to the location and conspiring to delete photos from their cell phones. The case highlights concerns in Congress about the Chinese Communist Party's espionage efforts here in the United States, either through buying land near U.S. military sites or reaching U.S. military bases. Of course, Joe Biden thinks this is no big deal. They're just friends of mine. Never mind. I added that. That's editorial. In 2020, 3 Chinese nationals were sentenced to prison terms for trespassing and taking photos of the Naval Air Station in Key West, Florida. In July, another Chinese student pled guilty to 2 misdemeanors under the Espionage Act for using a drone to take photos of the naval shipyards in Virginia. The 5 defendants are Zhu Zhekai, Guan Renqing, Zhou Haoming, Tao Jingzi, and Liang Yi, according to the complaints. The 5 were confronted after midnight at a boat launch on Bear Lake at Camp Grayling by a sergeant major with the Utah National Guard. According to the Phoebes, one of the defendants said, well, we're media. We're simply here reporting on what's going on for our Chinese newspaper. That's what that's what we're doing. Then they gathered their belongings and tried to slip away. The Utah National Guard had tactical operations going on near Bear Lake. The center had tents, antenna, satellite dishes, vehicles, generators, all of which were visible from the location where the sergeant major found these 5 Chinese spies. The 5 had reserved a room in a nearby hotel a week before they were spotted. On December 18, 2023, Guan, Guan, arrived at the Detroit Metropolitan Airport to board a flight to South Korea en route to China. He told the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol officials that he and his classmates had taken a trip to northern Michigan just to see the shooting stars. That would be the stars who were there with the National Guard doing the shooting. Meanwhile, in Guan's possession was an external hard drive containing images of military vehicles taken on the same night as the encounter with the National Guard officer. The Phoebes interviewed these guys separately at Chicago O'Hare Airport after they arrived there on a flight from Iceland. According to the Phoebes, the 4 said they were in Michigan to see a meteor shower. They had never watched a meteor shower before, and they thought it was porn. Anyway, they saw the 5 defendants discuss deleting photos from their phones and cameras on the Chinese social media app WeChat. The 5 appeared to have coordinated their statements regarding the incident, discussed the deletion of the photos from their electronic devices to prevent them from being seen by law enforcement. Representative John Molinar, Republican Michigan, and chairman of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, said in a post on X that the case shows once again that Chinese communist espionage, these spies can happen anywhere in America, and we have to be vigilant. The Chinese Communist Party obviously had an interest in Camp Grayling, and this is further evidence that would be a mistake. The Chinese government obviously has an interest in Camp Grayling, and this is further evidence that would be a mistake for Michigan leaders to allow the Goshen project to build in our states. Goshen is a Chinese battery manufacturer, and they want to build this plant up there. State funding for Goshen, this Chinese battery manufacturing plant, to bring Chinese nationals into Mecosta County in order to man the plant, because that's part of the deal. We're going to build this plant here, but we want to man it only with Chinese people. This is the way they usually do business. It's an open invitation for more spying. For more national security reasons, Governor Whitmer and the legislature should revoke the state funding for this battery plant immediately. Whitmer has said the Goshen plant, which is set to be built 100 miles from Camp Grayling, would make Michigan the global hub of mobility and electrification. Molinar also referenced his recent report saying that the American universities have to shut down their joint institutes with the Chinese universities and enact stricter guardrails on emerging technology research. American universities have to realize they have become targets for espionage, and we must protect the critical taxpayer-funded research that they do. I don't know if you guys are aware, but right here in Texas, the Chinese have a huge financial investment in the University of Texas system. They've been building buildings and creating Chinese studies and everything, paying literally millions of dollars into the Texas university system in order to mold public opinion and to have access to technology that they legally cannot have access to. So the Phoebes said these 5 guys they caught, well, they didn't really catch them, but they became aware of them, at the University of Michigan, where they were studying in a joint program. They began their studies for the 2-year degree program in August of 2022. University of Michigan states on its website they have more than 150 Chinese students attending the school through dual degree or joint graduate programs every year. Mr. Canberra, excuse me, that's not Mr. Canberra, Canberra, Australia. They have a think tank down there called the Strategic Policy Institute, and they highlighted the risk of research partnerships with Chinese universities. They've got several links to the Chinese military, and it's the home to 3 of Chinese major defense laboratories. In a speech in March of 2020, Yang Jinbin, the Chinese party secretary, said he would fully support and resolutely obey the central government's decision and uphold the party's overall leadership in creating these international schools between the United States and the Chinese. I'm telling you guys, this is serious stuff. There's no good that can really come from this because it's all one way. China has nothing to teach us. They come here because they can't create things, but they can sure copy them. They're coming here to get our information, and Democrat politicians are in their pocket. You would be surprised if you checked into your local city council. You would probably find 1 or more of your city council members that are actually getting monthly paychecks from the Chinese. I know that our own illustrious Greg Abbott has received some very nice contributions from the Chinese. We have to keep these things in mind, folks. We got a lot on the line. There's an election coming up. We've got perhaps as many as 100,000 Chinese soldiers right here in the United States right now, pre-staged. Why? What are they going to do? You know, there are 10-to-1 Chinese young men for women. There are 10 men for every woman in China. So that means 9 out of 10 of Chinese young men have no hope of ever getting married, of ever having a family. The only hope they have is to perhaps excel in battle, find glory in victory. So they come here for opportunity. Some of them maybe just because they'd like to know what it's like to be with a woman, even if it's an American woman. But let me tell you, my friends, this is very serious stuff. And if we do not take it seriously, we're going to come out on the losing end of this stick. Representative Matt Gaetz, one of my favorite people in D.C., issued a letter to Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Said that whistleblowers have told his office that service members and federal, state, and local responders are sitting idle, waiting on orders from FEMA. That's right, they got nothing they can do. As reported and further confirmed by my office, Matt Gaetz said hundreds, if not thousands, of members were deployed by the Department of Defense to North Carolina, and they're right now sitting on their hands waiting for FEMA to make some decisions. We have confirmed FEMA employees deployed on the clock are awaiting orders in hotels. Meanwhile, we were also confirmed that FEMA withheld pre-aid knowing this was coming. Gaetz slammed Mayorkas' comments on Thursday when he said FEMA did not have enough money to make it through the hurricane season. And this news comes after FEMA has spent literally hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars on these brand new Americans that were brought in by the border czar, Cami. They've prioritized funding for these illegal aliens over the Americans that actually paid in the tax money and assumed that our elected representatives were going to spend this money properly. So the aftermath of Hurricane Helene has become a major disaster, and your waste and unpreparedness are leaving Americans in distress, unable to access food, water, or medicine, and they're expecting help, but none is coming, said Gaetz said. So he asked, Mr. Mayorkas to provide some answers to the following questions, and he's given them a week to do it. What policies and regulations of the Department of Homeland Insecurity and FEMA have prevented emergency funds from being wasted on, well, these brand new Americans that actually have never done anything for America? So, percentage-wise, I mean, how does that work out? Do they get like 10%, the Americans get 90%, or is that flipped? 90% for the new Americans and nothing for the people that actually paid it in? He wants to know. Number two, he said, of your total budget for fiscal year 2024, what percentage of the funds can be guaranteed to have spent only on American citizens versus these brand new Americans? And in fiscal year 2024, what portion of the funds and disaster relief have been spent on things that were not a disaster, unless you consider it the man-made disaster of bringing in all of these brand new people, literally tens of thousands of them from places like China? Makes you wonder. The death toll currently being reported is around 200, but I suspect it's probably going to be close to 1,000 once we actually get some people in there and find out what's going on. I appreciate Matt Gaetz for demanding answers on these things. Unfortunately, if it were not for Elon Musk and Donald Trump, however, nothing would be getting done over there. But we've also discovered that FEMA has been preventing the modems and stuff that Elon Musk has donated, along with free internet service. They're preventing them from actually being delivered to anyone. They're stopping the trucks. And the other issue is some of these guys that were bringing in truckloads of relief parked at a truck stop to try to get a few hours of sleep before they went in to distribute this stuff, and they came out the next morning and their tires had been slashed. Now, I'm not saying FEMA did that, but who else would do that? Who benefits? You have to ask yourself these questions. Who benefits from doing this sort of thing? I thank Matt Gaetz from looking into this. Now this. In the meantime, not only are they slow walking the aid, but there's another issue here. Most of the areas that were ravaged by Hurricane Helene are filled with Trump voters. Asheville, North Carolina is a notable exception, but every place else, that's kind of a problem. We're 4 weeks and change away from a consequential presidential election, and we are 2 weeks away from the start of early voting in these hurricane-hit areas, Georgia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. 2 of those states, Georgia and North Carolina, are swing states. So I ask you, what incentive does Joe Biden and Kamala have to get Trump voters back on their feet, when getting them back on their feet means that they'll be able to go out and vote against Cammie? Well, the answer is they have no incentive to do so. In fact, they might be setting it up for some shenanigans. So you might still be naive and think, well, people are suffering. Cammie wouldn't withhold aid from people just to win a few votes. Well, she might, because she has the will to do it. She said she does. And people really don't matter that much to her. She's very much interested in her own personal welfare. So to win a few votes, Joe and Cammie threw the southern border wide open, brought in fentanyl by the ton, killing record numbers of Americans, and they've also aided and abetted sex trafficking with countless little kids that just disappeared. We know they got to the border. There's a record of them being received, but after that, they're gone. We don't know where they are. So to win a few votes, Joe and Cammie have advocated to permanently mutilate and sterilize underage children, sacrificing them to the BLT lobby. You don't think that the same people that would do that are going to leave a bunch of people they see as deplorables, ignorant, gunning, Bible-cleaning, redneck hillbillies without power for a few weeks if it makes the odds of them winning greater? Let me tell you, if you handed Cammie a red button, that would give every Trump voter stomach cancer. She would press that button. She'd break a leg running to press it. And then she would press it 4 more times just to be sure, because that's who she really is. And then she'd have her husband, Doug, carry that red button around in his purse just to make sure she could take it out and rub it like a talisman and cackle at the memory. Complaints about the federal government's lack of inaction are increasing by the day. This article, by the way, is written by John Nolte for Breitbart, and he is there. He said, I'm practically at ground zero here in Boone, North Carolina, but the best way for me to help my own little town is to stay put, stay out of the way. So I honestly have no idea how things are going. I do know that it's day 8. We have no cell phones. We have no internet service. He said, thankfully, somebody brought me a Starlink internet connection, and that's how I'm getting up. I also know the main road in and out of town by my place is still completely blocked. Florida doesn't seem to have these problems a week after the hurricane, but to be fair, Florida has muscle memory when it comes to handling hurricanes. West North Carolina doesn't get hurricanes. We're not used to this. So it's days after Hurricane Helene hit. Cammie and Uncle Joe activated 1,000 soldiers to support us with the delivery of food, water, and medicine. But these efforts are a little too small and way too late. Compare this to the military's response after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Literally thousands of troops were mobilized within 7 hours of receiving orders as the situation was spiraling out of control. But apparently it's not worth a call to the soldiers of the 101st Air Assault Division, who are 7 hours away. The 2nd Marine Division, which is stationed only a few hours away from Fort Liberty, they're standing by. But the people of North Carolina only seem to be worth sending a small contingent of active duty troops. Several phone calls have been made from Delaware, but since there are no real good photo opportunities, well, we haven't seen any of these Democrats down here. Mr. Nolte goes on to say, having lived in Appalachia for more than 10 years, we may not be as college educated as those folks up in Asheville, North Carolina, but we are very resourceful. And we will find a way to vote, especially if you believe you are playing games with our recovery in hopes of dissuading us from voting. Nevertheless, there is no downside for Joe or Cammie to slow walk this aid to red America in the hopes that we cannot get to our polling places. Just a few missing votes could make a difference, and heaven knows what the corporate media will say because they're unlikely to hold them accountable. Well, John Nolte, thank you for that article. Pretty well summed it up. Finally, let me end with this. Ukrainian leader Vladimir Zelensky has become increasingly upset with the work of the military intelligence head Kirill Budanov and Defense Minister Rustem Umerov, and he's likely going to replace them shortly. You got to remember, in Ukraine, the Democrat regime over there, they have suspended elections. There will be no more elections until the end of the war. They've imprisoned priests because they were saying things they didn't like them to say. And they're having a really hard time winning this war because, quite frankly, Russia's just got so much more to offer. Meanwhile, discussions about Budanov's sacking have been going on for a few days. The head of the military intelligence service, HUR, reportedly has strained relations with Zelensky's chief of staff, Andrei Yermak, and General Alexander Syrsky, the supreme commander of the Ukrainian armed forces. Budanov allegedly carried out some operations on his own without talking to anyone else and coordinating with the general staff, and they're now saying this is endangering some of their units at the front. I should remind you that so far, nearly 1 million Ukrainians have died in this war compared to 300,000 Russians. And it's only going to get worse. This thing would have been over in a week had we not been paying for it here in America. The good news is that money, which could be going right now out to the East Coast and saving lives and helping real Americans, is instead gone to make sure that all of these Ukrainians died. But I digress. Umerov was appointed in September last year to replace Alexei Reznikov, according to the Ukrainian media, because he was not delivering on the reforms. And Zelensky has demanded military procurement modernization to ensure stability inside the ministry. While these firings might not be imminent, they say, the issue is becoming increasingly urgent. Russian forces liberated the town of Ugledar in the south of the Donetsk People's Republic, which Ukraine has turned to a fortification that anchored a significant portion of the front line. They dare not lose it. Russian troops have also advanced in every other theater, while the Ukrainian incursion into Russia's Kursk region has failed to achieve any of the objectives with which it was tasked. I'm asking all of you to pray that this will be over quickly. Of course, when Donald Trump assumes the presidency, I'd predict this will be over in 72 hours. And I got the distinct feeling the other day when I was watching Zelensky meeting with Trump, I got the distinct feeling that he wants this over as bad as anyone. Anyway, I want to thank all of you guys out there, Freedom 1300, all over Beaumont and all over the world, wherever you watch this. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and share. Like and share. It makes a huge difference. And if you leave a comment, that's worth 10 likes. So please do that. I want to hear from you. Meanwhile, I hope you guys have a splendid Saturday. God bless you, and I'll see you on Monday morning.